Good morning.
Okay, excellent. And let's see. We're waiting for Marie, who is apparently in Estonia.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. I've been binge watching Day of the Jackal, and Estonia plays a pretty big. Talon plays a pretty big part in the story.
Ah,
So,
is that a series or the movie?
It is. Well, yeah, that's just it. That thing's been that story, that original novel's been remade so many different times. It's a new series that's on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like every time I watch another adaptation of that novel, I think to myself, well, why did they do it this way? Why did they do it this way? And this one's pretty good, but I think it would be better if they just didn't say it was an adaptation of the original novel. It was certainly better than the movie, the second movie that came out with I think Bruce Willis.
Oh yeah.
But a very interesting story.
We just started watching the John Adams documentary, not fiction documentary, but it's a series.
On HBO?
Yeah.
With Paul Giamatti?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that is very good.
It's so good. I actually was kind of dubious about it before I started. I'm like, I don't know. I actually have the book, and I got through about half of the book. Yeah. It's definitely a doorstopper. It's huge. But it's automatically intoxicating. Absolutely loving it so far.
Yeah.
Love Paul Giamatti.
Yeah. Paul Giamatti, I think.
I see Marie.
Okay, excellent. Let's see. Can we get her on board? Let me see if I can invite her. And to those of you who have just clocked in, it's 11 o'clock. Thank you for joining our Sunday brunch space.
Hi.
Marie.
Hey, Marie.
How are you?
Good morning.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Are you in Estonia? Where are you? Estonia?
Yeah.
I'm
in Tallinn, Estonia. What's the climate here? Is that what you said?
What's the time over there?
Oh, the time. It's 9 p.m.
Oh, okay. That's not too bad.
No, it's not too bad. It's not too bad at all. And I'm just excited to be here. Couldn't miss chatting about the San Francisco budget.
Oh yeah, exactly. Much more exciting than the various sights to see in Tallinn, isn't
it? Tallinn is actually really beautiful. Very excited to be here, and we're going to hit a few other spots in this neighborhood of the world before we head back.
And is there a particular reason why you're in Estonia?
Manul had a trip he was doing here with a group, kind of a tech people trip, cultural trip to Estonia, and so I decided to tag along at the last minute and add a few other places because we hadn't figured out what we were going to do for summer travel yet. So just this was an opportunity that presented itself, and we just decided to tag along.
Oh, cool. Estonia is just, not the typical place when people say, where are you going on summer vacation? Estonia.
No, but you should know better than most, Susan, having caught me in transit on my way to Uzbekistan.
Yes.
Last year for Christmas, or
That's
a year and a half ago for Christmas.
Yes.
We don't generally we do a lot that's off the beaten path in our family.
That's pretty cool.
Definitely off the beaten path.
Yes.
Sort of like the San Francisco budget. Dun dun
Good segue.
Well done. Yes, sort of like the San Francisco budget. We are definitely marching to the beat of our own drum with the San Francisco budget. That's for sure.
Indeed. Speaking of which, have any, and to everyone else listening, that is what we're sort of giving. We're giving sort of a mid post mortem or a middle assessment of what's going on with the budget process. The main process occurred last week with much sturm and drang at the Board of Supervisors, which to me basically sort of seemed like a lot of kabuki, because if you look at what got moved, how much of the needle got moved on a lot of things, it didn't seem like a lot. And has everyone here read the Chronicle article that came out yesterday?
I have not had a chance.
Okay. So yesterday, the Chronicle published an sort of an op-ed / analysis piece on Lurie and the budget, which is an interesting apologia for him.
I did see that.
Yeah. And I guess
You say an apology for him?
Apologia, as in sort of an excuse. Well, sort of an excuse for what we sort of see as the lack of progress there. But basically, he says this year was about right sizing. Next year we'll be looking at restructuring, which is that,
Yeah, brother.
I never seen. What? Go away. Who is that?
It's Daniel Lurie.
It's the Estonian police. They've come to revoke my residency. But yeah, I mean, basically, it sounds a lot like what London Breed was trying to do last year.
100%. Yep.
It's the same message is, we're gonna make it painless this time, or less painful this time. The real pain is coming next year.
Well, when he promised, to be that he was going to cut this, cut that, do this, do that, before this negotiating, ad backing, all that stuff even started, I said, before we go into this, everybody please go back and read the story about London Breed's plans and then what the actual results were. And it pretty much mirrors it. Nobody wants their money taken away. Everybody wants more money. The nonprofits want to keep their cabal. They don't want to have to go out and fundraise like other nonprofits because they've grown, fat and happy on the city taxpayer teat. Let's be honest.
Yep.
Yeah.
My biggest takeaway from that from that piece yesterday was, wow, the Chronicle is sounding incredibly conservative. I mean, you should read it. You should read this. It is. I was stunned, quite frankly, at their commentary. I mean, they were literally saying the San Francisco budget is way too big. It needs to be cut. Not enough is being done. I was shocked. That does not sound like the Chronicle. That we all
okay.
know.
Actually, I did read that piece. Sorry. I was hiking with the dogs yesterday, and I slipped tripped on a big rock, and I hit my cheekbone on a branch or something, and so I've got this big bruise and swelling on my cheek, so a little out of it. I know.
Oh no. So
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, 75 pounds of muscle, pit bull, husky, Doberman mix, and yeah, so she's a lot.
Yeah.
But the place where we were hiking has just got a lot of gopher holes and rocks, and I need to be more careful when we're up there.
Ooh.
Yeah, plus I was wearing the wrong shoes, so. And to solve that, John and I went to a mall yesterday, which is a Westfield mall in South San Jose, which, by the way, was thriving. So we'll talk about that a little later, too, about the mall, what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to take when you're in San Francisco and you are a massive fan and lover of San Francisco, and you're seeing what's happening to our malls here and our shopping here, to see that it's thriving in other parts of the Bay Area.
Yep.
Not that we don't want it to be thriving in other parts of the area. We want. We just want San Francisco to thrive as well.
Well, I wouldn't say that there are parts of San Francisco. I mean, there are parts of San Francisco which are not thriving, but there are others that are.
Yeah, I was at Stonestown a few weeks ago, and it was busy.
Exactly. Stonestown and the neighborhoods, I think, are doing really well.
Right.
Or most of the neighborhoods. The neighborhoods that don't seem to be doing well are the Mission and downtown.
And and a lot is going on with that too. And we would be remiss not to talk about what's happening. There's a little bit of gobbling up of real estate right now in the Union Square and financial districts. So that's definitely going on with some anticipation about some revival. What are they going to do? But these are outside. This is Nebraska, Toronto companies they're coming in. So very interesting.
I wonder how much transfer tax revenue we're going to be able to get out of that.
Yeah, we shall see.
I think that may be the bottom line, because even with prices going down, there's always going to be the transfer tax revenue that people over rely on. And we'll see what level it's at.
And of course, before we get back to the budget, just a note that the Westfield Mall, where Erica and I spent a day last week and did a post-mortem on the empty mall, because it's being auctioned off the end of this month, July 25th. And so we don't really know this is the fifth or sixth time they've tried to auction it. And so we don't really, right?
Yep.
And so we'll see if
they keep pulling it.
Yeah. So I don't know if this time they can do it, because frankly, it was ghostly and kind of freaky. But when Eric and I were there, it was virtually empty, but they were still piping in the air conditioning and the elevator music, which just seemed so wasteful. And all the lights were on for the most part, unless you went down a really, really dead hallway, then they were out. And so you just were in this kind of surrounded by these empty buildings with no lights and creepy elevator music that was echoing because there was no one in it. In the mall.
So surreal. It was so surreal.
It really was. It was surreal.
The Panda Express is still there.
Yes, and Shake Shack both doing very well, because people who work down there come there to get food. Panda Express, I swear you could put that in the middle of the desert and people would find it. So
well, it's interesting, because if you were to condense the remaining retailers and whatever businesses, like the little food kiosks and whatnot, into one floor, it would be fine. You would have this sort of like it would seem vibrant and healthy and all of that, but the place is so enormous. The square footage, I don't even know what the square footage is offhand, but it's enormous.
It is.
Right. So that is going to be a big hardship when it comes to selling it off, is you're looking at a tremendous amount of space. But it was interesting, because I recently was talking to some people from the Philippines who were talking about their mall culture. And one of them said very specifically that there's a mall in Manila, or outside Manila, where it is at least 4 times the size of San Francisco Center. And it's packed to the gills. Every store is filled. And you think, well, if that's the Philippines, it is what we would consider an impoverished country. And here we are in San Francisco, which is, no one can deny the fact that we have tremendous wealth here and vibrancy, and people who are, who want to shop and want to come. So I love looking at these dichotomies. So looking at one side to this, like, what have we done wrong and how can we do right? And it was fascinating. And I know, Susan, you said that you just recently went. Was it Valley Fair? No,
you don't go to Valley Fair on the weekends, because you cannot get in the place. It's, remember that they have the Din Tai Fung and the Eataly, which both rejected the Westfield San Francisco, or Westfield rejected, because I think they saw the writing on the wall. So Valley Fair is, I'm not sure if it's as large. I think it probably is, because it has outside components as well. But I would say, I know for a fact that it's the number one performing mall in the Westfield portfolio. And it is, you just can't. I mean, and there's a ton of parking, but you can't even get a parking space. So we went to a much smaller Westfield Mall, which is closer to Los Gatos in South San Jose Almaden Valley off of Blossom Hill. And we went to San Raku, which of course originated up in San Francisco. And I was talking to the owner, and he said, well, you know, we're pretty much, most of my top chefs and my wife and I, you know, are spending all our time down here because this is a top performing restaurant for us in San Francisco. They've closed 2 of them up there. They have the original one on Sutter still open, but the one in the Westfield Oak Ridge, it's called, is packed all the time. They have a Ranch 99 there that was absolutely packed. The Nordstrom Rack where we went for shoes was, you know, shoulder to shoulder. The entire mall was packed. They have a movie theater. They have a thriving food court. It has a Panda Express and a Shake Shack, by the way. So, yeah, no, I mean, we know when people say, oh, it's just the online is killing malls.
No,
it's not. That's not a true. I mean, the Apple Store there was mobbed. So,
you know, I think there's a bit of a cyclical thing to this, because one of the things that I'm thinking about is I was in LA during the 2008 financial crisis, and I walked around the Bonaventure Hotel. Are you guys familiar with that particular building? Yes. The 4 cylinders, etc. And so it's got these huge malls and huge atria inside the.
Oh yes, that place. Yeah.
And I was walking through there, and this was sort of at the height of the 2008 financial crisis, and it was in a very similar state. And moreover, what I found really interesting was that a lot of lower and low rent businesses had sort of taken it over. I mean, it seemed like it literally had been turned into a Chinatown arcade, because there were a lot of Asian and ethnic businesses that had sort of taken over these once high-end spaces.
Interesting.
So I put that out as being rather interesting. And I think also I wanted to highlight the interview we did with the Blueprint guys, Jay Cheng and Scotty Jacobs, where they talked about, you know, the potential revenue out of San Francisco is always going to be really good. We don't really have a revenue problem. It's a spending problem.
100%. Which brings us back to the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've always said that it's a, you know, when you have a budget of $15 billion and you can't even manage to cut a couple of million without people, you know, getting arrested at City Hall. I mean, the budget proceedings, you know, I'm a huge fan, everybody knows, of Matt Mahan. I think he's the best mayor in the Bay Area. But he, you know, in San Jose, the way they do things is the mayor actually attends all of the meetings that they do, and he's kind of a member of the city council. It's a different system, but you know, it wasn't like they didn't have some issues or some arguments, but it goes much more smoothly than things ever do in San Francisco, because, well, there's just a huge issue with the unions and the nonprofits that have just grown so used to, you know, people say to me, well, you know, you don't think that nonprofits deserve funding? Well, you have a nonprofit. I said, well, of course, but we have to go out and fundraise like Marie does, like every nonprofit does. The problem with San Francisco, you know, the homeless and drug nonprofits or the harm reductionists is, you know, all of these have, you know, gotten used to getting billions and billions of dollars in contracts handed them. Some of them, most of them, no bid and just no oversight, never audited, no requirements for performance metrics. And they've gotten used to just getting away with this. And now, you know, when someone threatens to take it away, they pitch a fit and they get their allies on the board and the union to come in and pitch a fit. And next thing you know, we're back to square one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry. Oh. Go ahead, Marie. You're on. Calling from far away.
Well, I was going to say my top line on this is, you know, the one good step, very solid step that has been made is that we did not increase the size of the city employee ranks this year, which is a positive step. However, there is a lot more work to do, and just the description Susan just gave of how our budget process works, it's really not designed to work for the residents of San Francisco. It is very much designed to work for everybody who wants something.
Right.
And those are our tax dollars that they are asking for, and our tax dollars should be spent very carefully. This is our money, our hard-earned money that is supposed to be supporting us. It's supposed to be serving the residents of San Francisco. And when you see that hundreds upon hundreds of union employees, hundreds upon hundreds of nonprofit employees and beneficiaries of the nonprofits show up, and many of them really just read from scripts, the same script over and over and over again.
You're talking about the public comment day that
yeah,
basically it's 1 day out of the entire budget process, and it of course takes place during working hours, which means
of course we I know a lot of my members actually went to speak. I don't think any of them were able to because, they got there in the morning thinking they were going to be able to, wait, maybe an hour and get to speak. But you show up and the line goes around the halls of City Hall, stretches as far as the eye can see. I posted about it that day. And people had to go. They can't, regular working people, regular citizens, residents of San Francisco do not have the freedom to show up and wait for hours upon hours upon hours. I did speak, and according to a supervisor who reached out to me, who said, "Wow, that was brave." As far as he could remember, I was the only one who spoke, and I know actually another member of ours did speak as well, but I was the first person, and I was the only person in the room when I was there who said, "Hey, this budget is too high. There is so much that needs to be cut. You need to focus on the people of San Francisco, not all the people who are here demanding something from our tax dollars." And it was I got heckled, I got yelled at. It's not easy for regular people to just show up and speak, for what's right, because there are so many people there who show up with a huge posse, and they are all saying the same thing, and they are all basically asking for something, whereas we're asking for rationality, responsibility, fiscal restraint, which is a much more esoteric ask.
Right.
I mean, a good example is asking for money for the people in the RVs. The majority of them are illegal immigrants. So I just, I've spoken to some sources at City Hall that are involved with that whole thing. They've confirmed that the majority of them are illegal immigrants. Huge percentage of them only have been here for 6 months, and now they're expecting free housing vouchers. That can't continue. No. It can't.
That's and I know there's one of our listeners here who will really appreciate this comment. That's what we call the magnet effect.
Mm-hmm.
That will draw more people to our city who are looking for free housing or a better life, which is great, but there needs to be some give and take there. There cannot just be San Francisco taking care of everyone.
Which Absolutely. I've said forever, and yet we get called racist and all this stuff. And I think all of us here I think that we're practical, right? In that I don't want to take care of somebody who came here from another country 6 months ago who expects free housing when there are American citizens, veterans, on the street. I don't want to take care of a lot of them either because most of them are from other places. There's got to be something's got to give where, there has to be a priority for people from San Francisco. And if you don't have that many people from San Francisco and you cut off the funding for people that aren't from San Francisco, you're going to save a lot of money because it's, I was just talking today about this guy the Chronicle mentions in their homeless article, the fentanyl death article. And as soon as they bring up someone, I look up their criminal record because you always know they're going to have one. And this guy his last name is Pope, 31, from the East Bay, and has this extensive criminal record. I'm talking violent, like 4 or 5 arrests for domestic violence, cohabitant, abuse, could be a child, could be his girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. But this guy's got firearms arrests, a lot. And he's down, the Chronicle just basically says he's down there selling stolen goods. The Chronicle just, good old Maggie Yang, she just blows it off like it's nothing. And then you look him up and you find out that he's from the East Bay. Right. So send him back. Right. Stop giving him $600 a month or $700 a month. Send him back.
Right. Well, that is, what you just said, the $700 a month that we give everyone is outrageous. And we all know that the Coalition on Homelessness intercepts people coming to San Francisco from other areas and tells them what they need to say in order to, quote unquote, establish residency. I don't think we should be, providing the benefits that we provide. Maybe there's a short-term benefit. You want to just help someone immediatay in an urgent situation, but
to get a bus ticket,
and to get a bus ticket, exactly.
I came back to San Francisco with nothing. I didn't get any help.
Right. Well, and
I got a job.
The idea that the idea that we're just kind of taking care of anybody who says they're from here. I think we need to have a new policy that says you have to prove that you had residency here before we will provide you the $700 a month. That's, I don't think a lot of San Franciscans realize our tax dollars are funding thousands of people receiving $700 a month, plus they get smartphones, plus the tents, plus the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We really have, over the last decade and a half created, or maybe it's 2 decades even, created a very, very poorly run system, and again, one that has created a magnet effect. Why wouldn't you come here if you're seeking to be taken care of? San Francisco seems to be doing it, which, getting us back to the budget, is a very very critical factor in why our budget is such a mess and has been such a mess. And
but the progressives have a remedy for that. You know that, right?
Oh, they do?
Yeah, it's the Prop Cs. We just create more taxes, and we make the taxes easier to implement.
Yes.
This is one of the things that I found so pernicious about both the Prop Cs, is that they essentially took those they essentially got rid of the supermajority vote necessary for normally passing a new tax by creating this legal fiction that it's coming from the public instead of the political class or the politicians who want to put this together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I would love to jump in here on one thing that we should probably establish here is what exactly a budget is. A budget is literally working within financial parameters. Money coming in versus cash going out. It's a cash flow statement, right? So everything must be accounted for. You can't spend more than you have coming in. San Francisco has become very accustomed to working within a deficit. So what's the problem with that? Just the same as you would within your own home. You have a family budget, you have your personal budget. What happens? And this is going to be like I would love everyone to kind of stop and think. What happens when you overspend? what does it do to your finances, to your peace of mind, to how you're able to manage your expenses? It becomes a train wreck, which is what we have right now. So the word deficit and budget, it almost gets, it starts to become abstract. This is not abstract. This is very real. If we don't close the deficit, we face very real and very severe consequences. Very much worth talking about what those consequences are and what we do face. Does anybody want to throw that out? What could happen?
Well, I mean, obviously, in your own home, in your own family life, if it's incredibly stressful, and you have to tighten your belts. If you overspend, you're either borrowing and then trying to spend less the next cycle so that you can pay people back. What happens with the San Francisco budget is, it's very easy to balance because it's balanced on paper, which means you're taking your projected revenue and setting those up against your liabilities or your projected expenses. And the problem with that is it's pretty easy to balance on paper, but the revenue expectations are not necessarily accurate. It's not even necessarily through any any malintent. It's just it may or may not be accurate. The fact that buildings are being sold for far less than what they were worth 2 years ago, 4 years ago, is we may not be tracking this very carefully, but I'm here to say that is a huge problem because that will lower the tax base going forward. And if that continues to happen, I mean, I think it's great that buildings are being bought. That is a good sign that people are willing to invest in San Francisco and betting big on San Francisco, which of course I'm all for. But the fact that they're getting, some of these buildings at fire sale prices will impact our tax base for years, if not decades to come. And so the revenue that we're counting on, I think, is probably optimistic. I don't think it's entirely realistic. It depends on where we're off. But as you noted earlier, and I said this in my Voice of San Francisco series of 13 articles on the San Francisco budget prior to the budget work being done, and you echoed it again, is the revenue isn't really the issue. It's the spending. It's the fact.
Oh dear.
Okay, did we lose
Marie?
Buddy?
We lost Estonia.
Marie, did we lose you? Okay, let me see if hopefully she will be able to log off and then log back on again.
Yeah, I mean, Marie,
idea that.
Okay, hello.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, did you lose me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. What was the last thing I said? Because it was gold.
I think you said it was the spending that the problem is spending, not revenue.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, if you
buildings being sold for under what they're worth.
Yes, and our population is back to 2012 levels, but our spending is up 54% in inflation-adjusted dollars from those 2012 levels, which is $5.5 billion additional over where we should be if we were right-sized. And that is what should be concerning to everyone. And of course, it's because of all those, add backs and everything that happened at City Hall. It's very, very hard to stand up to that.
Wait, the spending is how much more?
$5.5 billion in inflation-adjusted dollars.
That's how much more it is than in 2012, huh?
Yeah, and in inflation adjusted dollars,
right?
It's not that it's just gone up by 5.5
right.
billion. It's gone up. You know, comparing apples to apples, we're spending $5.5 billion more.
Wow.
Than we were. Yeah, when we were the last time we were this population size.
Nonprofits. I'm just saying.
It's also
nonprofits account for about actually, nonprofits do account for about 1.6 billion of that, because we weren't really spending on nonprofits in 2012. That's a new London breed phenomenon.
Yeah.
But the other, I mean, the biggest piece of that is spending on government employees.
Yes, 30%.
Yeah.
We are up by the year 2005, I believe, and we have only had a tiny incremental growth in our population. I don't care how many people come in and try to explain this all away. The math doesn't math. It does not work. It's a farce. So. And
I've written articles. People try to say, "Oh well, San Jose is a city." So instead, I took San Jose and Santa Clara County and looked at them, and it still doesn't even come close to San Francisco. And with way more people, the budget is far leaner in both Santa Clara County and in San Jose, and they run airports and all the stuff people try to say, "Oh, but the airport."
All the time.
Well, I mean, that's the other issue, is that all these enterprise organizations, like the airport, and even to an extent like SFMTA, are supposed to be paying for themselves.
Yeah.
Yes. And they are. Apparently, it does work out. They come out in the black every year. So really, the airport is not part of the equation when you start looking at these percentages, these numbers.
Oh, interesting.
Right. San Francisco has become, it is a jobs program, not an efficient government program world. This is a jobs program. We add and we add and we add, and they continue to expect. And SEIU comes in with their purple jackets, and they cause a fuss, and they throw down banners, and they try and shut you down. Meanwhile, you step back and you look at it and you think, well, who's listening to these guys? Who? Why? No, yeah, they have a lot of power. They have power because you give them power. So I'm done with this. It is complete nonsense. So I'm sorry, Marie, that you were only one of two or three. I remember I tried to go down to that meeting and I just couldn't that day. But their voice is far too loud for what they do in positive outcomes.
Their voice is far too loud, and just as a side note, they get raises pretty much every year, but there is no restriction on reducing the number of employees in their contracts. So I think that's probably what we're going to have to start doing. I mean, I think I really appreciate that Mayor Lurie has implemented a hiring freeze. I think that's critical. I would probably go even further on that, make that stronger. But it is also, I think it is the right thing to do for the city of San Francisco and the people who live here to further reduce the size of our government. And the idea that they're raising fees and raising revenue by messing with parking, charging for courts, court reservations in our public amenities. Like, why are we paying for these things twice? We already fund Rec and Park. Now they want to charge. I mean, I wish I had more time to play tennis, but this isn't really going to impact me that much. But I feel terrible for nonprofits that use this, non-city funded nonprofits that use Rec and Park. to teach kids and provide after school activities for kids, or teach adults to play tennis, they now will have these court fees imposed on them. All of the things that they do to increase parking revenue and things like that. We already pay for all of this. Why is the budget being balanced on those of us who are already contributing?
Well, I think Phil Ginsburg is another one who it's time for him to move on. He's just, I've, clearly have a long history going back to the Marina Times, where I did the 3-part Stowe Lake expose on how Rec and Park was trying to get rid of the family that had run it for years and bring in a concessions company from Arizona, which they ended up doing, and made all these promises. And of course, not one of them was kept. And he's, for a very long time, years ago wrote a pretty prophetic article that was titled "Phil Ginsburg Wants to Turn Golden Gate Park into Disneyland." And, then up goes the Ferris wheel. They start shutting down the streets and putting up doggy diner heads. They close the Great Highway, where, I sent video messages from last week, Wednesday, 12:52 p.m. There wasn't a soul on it except for a few workers and a couple of kids on scooters, and that was it. And one runner who jogged past me. Everyone else was crossing over like me, crossing over to go to the beach with their dog or whatever. I'm assuming that's being counted as their 7,800 people that go there every day or whatever they're claiming. But the bottom line is that, he's always used the city of San Francisco taxpayers as his personal banking, trust. And it's time for that to end, too.
I think it's highly insulting to everybody in San Francisco who lives here and works here to take a look at the situation and get excuse after excuse as to why this budget isn't being balanced, why we have so many employees, why we have so many nonprofits that we're paying for, that many of which are redundant or not accounted for. And you can look, I used to be a budget and debt counselor a long time ago, but I literally counseled thousands of people on their budget. They would come in distressed, and you go through each line item and you go through their capability. How much could you make? Where could you cut back? What's the future look like? All of this, and you look at all of these factors and you come up with a plan that works. If you could do it on an individual case by case basis with, where people are making hard decisions so that they can get ahead and be financially healthy, be secure, right? If you can do it on your own, so too can the city of San Francisco. It's not that different. So I personally, I just look at it from that perspective, which is, it's really insulting for kind of the city, just the supervisors and Daniel Lurie and anybody else who's involved in this process to kind of throw their hands up and say, well, there's only so much we can do. That's nonsense. That's not true. You have to stop paying attention to the people who've got the loudest voices. They are a distraction from what needs to be done.
Absolutely.
And Marie, you said that you had some ideas about what did not get fixed that you wish had. What are some of those things?
Well, I think the big picture is just not cutting enough, not cutting the number of city employees we have. I think that like I said, not adding to the employee roles this particular government cycle is a huge plus. But there's a lot that, there's a lot that's still in there. And I think the last time we talked, I had mentioned, that I'd spoken with the mayor's office, and, they were looking forward to really hitting the ground running in July, so right now this year, instead of waiting until December, which is the general budget cycle. by prior mayors. So I'm very excited about that. I'm very hopeful that gives enough runway to really dig deeper and figure out what can and cannot be cut. Because as you are well aware, the departments didn't really do what they were supposed to do.
Right.
I think I can't remember off the top of my head now, but I think it was maybe 15 out of the 50 something odd departments actually returned a budget that reduced their size, which was Mayor Lurie's directive. And then, the mayor's office sent notice to all those departments that didn't comply. We're not joking around. We need you to do this. I think the departments tried to at least look like they were doing something, but what they were doing was, again, balancing on paper.
Mhm.
So they increased the revenue that they said they were going to have, the reimbursements from from insurers and things like that, in order to balance their budget, which isn't really balancing their budget. And several of them just didn't do what they were supposed to do at all. So hopefully the earlier start date in this will allow for a lot more digging in and insistence on getting it right this time around.
In terms of department spending, and this is kind of an inflammatory question because in the political status of things, often the firefighters union is on the moderate side of things, but has the fire department ever gotten rid of their own wooden ladder factory?
What?
The fire department makes their own ladders.
No.
They claim that, or at least this was the case a few years ago, they claim that the fiberglass ladders are not good enough.
What? Wait, what? So wooden ladders are better in a fire?
Well, I guess they probably saturate them with I don't know, Thompson's water seal or whatever they use to make wood fireproof. Yeah, there's.
Wait, what?
This is the point of.
That sounds like a story we need to have in The Voice.
Had their own ladder factory instead of flying ladders.
Interesting.
I feel a story coming on. That's nuts. I had no idea.
Yeah, I had no idea of that either. Was it more cost effective for them to make their own?
It was a question. I think it was a question of that they basically thought that the wooden ladders were more effective and more durable than metal or fiberglass ladders. Let me see if I can look this up. Maybe make sure this wasn't a hallucination. But
well, I just posted an article that's also related to this. The other thing that I think that San Francisco has to look in the mirror at is of the three major cities, downtown recovery, San Jose, again, much smaller budget, many more people. Their downtown recovery is the only one that's thriving, and San Francisco is way behind on downtown recovery, which is, again, tax dollars. Think of all of the sales tax, for example, being lost by the empty ghost mall that, Eric and I were both in tears when we walked every single floor, and just, it was, at points we were like crying, but like laughing because it was so absurd. But think of the tax dollars being lost, right? I saw the empty guest store where I went into credit card debt, in that mall. I mean, I spent so much at Nordstrom and, Bloomingdale's. I mean, I used to get my Nespresso coffee pods there that cost a fortune. The tax dollars being lost downtown are enormous.
Yes. I think of that every time one of my friends tells me that rather than deal with, what's going on downtown, parking downtown, dealing with sort of just the difficulties that have been created in San Francisco over the last several years, they go to Corte Madera to do their shopping, or just pop over to the Trader Joe's, right after Mill Valley, or whatever it is they tell me they're doing, or pop down to Daly City because it's just easy.
I used to do that all the time. I will admit, even before the downturn, it just was easier. If you had a bunch of shopping to do, it just made more sense.
Yeah, and it breaks my heart every time I hear it, because those are dollars that could be spent to make our economy better and stronger, and instead they are leaving the city when we could be keeping them here.
Yeah, I mean, we've made it very difficult for people to spend money, open businesses, enjoy the city. Well, it's kind of wild when you think about it, is that we have actually instituted roadblocks to get all of these things done. I mean, we've made it very hard, and that includes Market Street. You can't drive on Market Street on that big portion. Parking. More and more people are anti-car and have a voice at the table about this, about how they can close streets and how they can make it more difficult for drivers. This all feeds into the problem of people not wanting to shop downtown. You remove those roadblocks, and you will automatically see a change in that. So make it easier for people, not more difficult.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, Susan, I don't know how you, either of you actually feel about opening up Market Street. I don't think we've actually discussed this as a group.
I would like there to be, I mean, I used to always I tended to park in the 5th and Mission garage, but mostly I took Muni down there. So, but yeah, I mean, I still, I think it inhibits tourists. I know it does, because I've talked to people from other places who definitely say that not being able to drive downtown is a deterrent, because driving in San Francisco is hard enough. I mean, when I first moved back after college, I remember friends from the Silicon Valley said, "Oh, I don't want to come and visit you because you live in the Haight and there's no parking." They literally didn't want to visit me. I had to come visit them because they didn't want to park. There was nowhere to park.
So what say you, Mike?
Right.
I think in general that there should be more. We can try and rebuild our streets to be, more walking friendly, but we need to create parking structures. And to that end, I tend to think, in addition to having centralized parking structures, we need to sort of charge for them a nominal fee that will help create revenue for the city. I think in general, there are, you have to nudge people if you want to change their habits, but there's a difference between nudging and running over them. A perfect example of running over them is the Great Highway situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think a good example of nudging, in my opinion, you may disagree with me, is the imposition of parking fees in Golden Gate Park. I've always thought that there should be meters in Golden Gate Park because there's 5,000 spaces in that park, which is the main and up until now they've been free. That's the main reason that the underground garage is not used. And a lot of people, in previous generations, were using Golden Gate Park as sort of a park and ride, where they would park there and then do other business in the city and then come back. We want visitors, but the main reason we want visitors is that they should spend a reasonable amount of money in our city. They're not entitled to a free park and ride.
I can work with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I used to park in there. I used to park in Golden Gate Park. Maybe they need to exclude residents, because I used to park in Golden Gate Park to take, my dad, who, my parents moved to the city in 1953, and my dad, in 2008, had dementia, and so his memory of things past were much better than his memory of things present. And, once a week after we'd have a couple of different, talking about the Great Highway, we'd take the Great Highway to his veterans appointment. And then we'd have lunch somewhere he picked. And then we'd stop at Golden Gate Park, and he would get to see things that he remembered, either the band shell or go up to the DeYoung and look at the view or whatever. But it was important to him. And even sometimes just sitting on a bench with him, and I'd bring Jazzy and we'd go for a walk, or, and then my dad would just sit on the bench and just love every minute of it. And, I don't think I should have to pay to park and take my dad to the park. I also think Stowe Lake needs to be excluded because that's a local place. And while I liked to walk from the Haight to there, that's on a day when I had plenty of time. When I had to get back and do writing, it was a necessity to drive the dog, take our walk around Stowe Lake, and then come back. So I do not think there should be parking meters in parts of Golden Gate Park.
Yeah, I agree with you, Susan. And Mike, just, your comment is actually well taken, because the whole reason that residential parking permits started in San Francisco probably 40 years ago or so was to protect the residents of San Francisco from people from Marin doing exactly that, coming in and parking, on my grandparents' block on Clay Street for, 10 hours while they jumped on the bus, went downtown, worked, and came back. That was why residential parking permits started. They started to protect residents, and apparently, my grandparents talked about it. They got like stacks of little hanging things that their friends and guests could put in their front windshield, so that their friends and guests did not have to pay to park, or were not subject to this restriction, to the parking time limits, which that is all very pro-resident. That is very pro, the people who live here, the people who are funding this place, the people who are committed and devoted here. The way that parking permits have evolved, it's very punitive now. You have to pay $90 or $110, whatever it is now, and you have to go down and you have to stand in line. And they might have changed that recently, but it evolved so that it's not working for us. It's working to bring money in to the city government, and you have to ask, all these things that they do to increase revenue, how much of it is actually serving the citizens of San Francisco versus feeding the beast of this infrastructure that's been created? And that's what I really object to.
Me too.
On a daily basis, is that the money isn't serving us anymore. It is merely funding unnecessary jobs. But to go back to Erica's question about Market Street, Erica and I have had this conversation, and I'll just throw out, I am 100% supportive of cars on Market Street. I love it that the mayor has opened it to Waymo, but that's just a start, in my opinion. I think it's great that Uber and Lyft have basically said, yeah, we're going to go on it too. 50% of the storefronts from Mid-Market to the Embarcadero, where Market is closed, are vacant. That is dismal. 50% are vacant.
Wow.
The hotels are suffering. Brokers will tell you they can't even take potential proprietors to Market Street, because if you can't drive on a street, it's just not compelling. Right. It's not, people, they can't just drive them by and say, hey, check this out, let's jump out and look at it. They're not even going there. And the taxis, if you can't, well, I guess they were allowed to go on, but it's just, you've developed this situation that has not gone well. And, we've seen what's happened on Van Ness. I mean, the reconstruction project on Van Ness ruined commerce on Van Ness. And the same is happening on Market Street. This is a pilot that has failed, and we need to fail fast and move on. And we have not done that. And, thankfully, we have a new mayor who is saying, wait a second, this really hasn't worked. Let's get something back on there. It's not, this Euro utopia that they were envisioning is not manifesting. And so I don't think it's worth anybody's time or effort or energy to continue, to just, continue to fail. We should be trying
away from the budget situation. That's also the same reason we failed with Vision Zero.
Yeah.
That we expected this policy to be successful in an environment that is very, very unlike the existing parking and driving and street environment in Europe in the beginning, in the first place. Europe, to an extent, has always had narrow streets. They've always had smaller cars. They've always had more expensive parking, and they've had more car-free area. They've already had more car-free areas, and most importantly, because these programs have been put in place by people who hate the police, they forgot that all these countries also enforce speed limits and traffic laws. But I digress.
I think we've all digressed.
It's so funny, Marie. You bring up such a beautiful and brilliant and harrowing point here, which is this ideological fantasy land that so many people in San Francisco live in. It's going to be Europe. Oh, it's going to look like Denmark. And they come up with these hilarious AI generated images of people driving. Why I said the word driving? Riding on their bicycles with baskets and loaves of bread, and there's children behind in these sort of contraptions, and it is so out to lunch. It is, and I am all about, hey, I am good on having a big, broad vision. Love it. But it does have to be rooted in some kind of reality. We are not, and we will never be Amsterdam. We will never be any of these countries that you salivate over. It's not going to happen. We are San Francisco. It is very different. It's just get over it. Get over it, my friends. Will not happen. And reality needs to take over. And
I tend to think that what our cities generally going to look like in the future is you're still going to have a significant amount of dependence upon driving, except for certain center city areas that look like Century City, and you get there by taking your Zoox thing.
Oh, they have the Zoox. I just saw those.
I love
they must. Zoox must have a barn or something where they keep all their vehicles over by. I went to drop off some donations and visit the San Francisco ACC, Animal Care and Control, the city shelter. Which, by the way, can I please say to people, San Francisco Animal Care and Control is the city-run shelter. They've lost a huge chunk of their budget. They only have 3 officers to cover the entire city, and they're dealing with numerous problems with the homeless, abuse cases, and also other areas of the city. They've got to go cover all of the cruelty cases. I mean, this is just 3 people. And by the way, they have to take care of everything from coyotes to pigeons. The San Francisco SPCA don't tag them because they don't take animals in, period. They pick and choose to keep their live release rate high so they can continue to get grants. And they have millions, $300-something million in the bank, $36 million, I'm sorry, in the bank, and they pay people $300,000 a year. At least 12 people are making over $200,000. ACC is the city shelter. They survive on a tiny little budget. So if you're going to make a donation, make it to the Friends of Animal Care and Control, because that doesn't go through the city, that goes directly to the animals. And do not donate to the San Francisco SPCA, because they have millions of dollars, and stop tagging them in their posts. Tag Animal Care and Control, but more importantly, please put the number for Animal Care and Control emergency in your phone. And I know you like to tag me, and I do get it to my contacts there, but the very first thing you need to do, because by the time they get there, oftentimes the situation has moved, is you need to call the emergency, and then the nearest van will come. But the problem is they're so understaffed. They're struggling. They have to close on Mondays, which means less animals being adopted. And if you saw the Chronicle article, it basically mirrors the SPCA. Unfortunately, the expose that I did in 2009 when I spent 4 months undercover with Rocket Dog and saw that they were taking fewer dogs at the San Francisco SPCA than the little grassroots rescue like Rocket Dog, who took over 200 animals that year, and the SPCA took less than 100. So, and by the way, they get all their animals from the Central Valley because they can pick and choose. Very overwhelmed in the Central Valley with purebreds and stuff, so they can get these, I hate to say it, but designer dogs and things. Although Animal Care and Control has a doodle right now, they're showing up. I digress, but please know the difference. And the city shelter is struggling, and I really want Daniel Lurie to do something to help their budget, because he did visit, which I'm really happy about. And he said, should I just make a call to the SPCA? I love that about Daniel Lurie. That's the best attitude, because he's not a politician. He's just like, I'm the mayor. There's a problem. Should I just call the SPCA? Please do.
Yeah, let's get it taken care of.
Just call, please. And that's what I love about him. And I'm really hoping that, I just feel that he's being bullied like London Breed about the budget. And I just don't know what can be done about that.
Well, I don't know what can be done about it either. I think this next cycle is going to be interesting. And there's definitely a disconnect between what the mayor can put into the budget and what the Board of Supervisors then potentially does, when they have everyone screaming at them at the budget meeting, which we witnessed this cycle. And it's not just that budget meeting where everyone lines up and speaks for hours and hours and hours. They also show up a month or two before at various Board of Supervisors meetings when the budget isn't on the agenda. Because remember, you can give public comment about anything that's not on the agenda during regular general public comment. And so a lot of these organizations have started showing up in advance to ask for their quote unquote fair share. So I think there's a lot of psychological pressure that goes on in the month and a half, 2 months leading up to the budget at the Board of Supervisors level that makes it very hard for them to say, yeah, we're going to go through with this and we're going to cut all these positions. Because you also have to remember, a lot of they all know each other. They all work down there together. Yeah. You're cutting your friends, and it's so much more distant and abstract to think about doing what's right for the citizens of San Francisco versus, I don't want my friend to lose their job. But also remember, 58% of San Francisco employees do not live in San Francisco.
That's right.
So
that is correct.
Yeah. So you really are doing a lot of damage to San Francisco by, first of all, keeping all these positions that we really don't need. We're a tiny city. We do not need 34,000 city employees. And then, on top of that, there's, there's all the nonprofit workers, et cetera, et cetera. So, we tiny city are really funding close to 40,000 people annually. It's overwhelming and oppressive if you think about it that way. And so, really the right thing is to really take a hard stand and say, we can't do this anymore.
So Marie, let me just jump in real fast with that number, because what's also important to remember here is that if you were getting something for all your money, this wouldn't be as much of a concern. If we looked out our doors and went anywhere in the city and said, wow, this is a fully functioning urban environment. Everything is on time, sparkling clean. Everything is going according to plan. And oh my gosh, we are the envy of the world. I don't think that there would be this much attention on the budget. Certainly efficiency is important, but so we have this issue where it feels broken, and we're spending too much, and we have too many people on the payroll. So it's well, that is something important to remember here.
But devil's advocate here, I mean, when I'm down in the Silicon Valley, I see constant work going on the streets, cleanups, trees, everything being fixed. They have, they spend, I believe it is $1,300 per resident, and San Francisco spends $7,000 per resident and gets none of that. So you can do less with more. You can do more with less. You don't need to spend $7,000 per resident. You can spend $1,300 per resident, but they also have, I believe it is 7,000 or 8,000 city employees in San Jose versus San Francisco city employees, which is an outrageous 35,000 or whatever. So I think it's, that would be a bad precedent to say, oh, if you only did your jobs, we would love you. I think we should say you can do more with, less, as other cities are doing.
I couldn't agree more. It just adds insult to injury.
And there comes a point where, you just need to make the hard decisions. I mean, he's the mayor. These people, I love when Aaron Peskin, of course, is the go-to quote for the Chronicle, the Standard. They always run to Aaron. I find that hysterical because he criticizes, Daniel Lurie, of course he can't get that done. Of course he can't. Well, Aaron Peskin has served longer than any politician in San Francisco. And over 2 decades, he hasn't gotten anything done. So, I mean, it's really, really ironic to see the multiple time president of the Board of Supervisors criticizing a brand new mayor for not, quote, getting it done when he spent all those years. But I will say one other thing about that board that we have now, and I said it when they were put on the board, we do not have a moderate Board of Supervisors, period.
Agree.
Sadly.
Yeah.
So it's 12:10, and I'm thinking, we've had a couple of people request to speak. Do we want to open up the mics?
Sure.
Okay, because I think like Marissa, you wanted to speak, but then you went away. Let's see, where are you? You're still listening, I think. And I see Griffin is here, and JJ, and some other of our regular friends. Where'd Melissa? Yeah, Marissa's still here.
I see her. Marissa Cat?
Yeah. She's one of our regular readers.
Oh, I actually got a really nice comment from somebody who sent me a private message about how much she's enjoying these spaces.
Okay.
So she wanted to remain anonymous, so I'm just going to wave from my apartment. Thank you for listening, and thank you for such a great and kind comment.
Nice.
You know who you are. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
I've had similar comments. One person did say they wish that we disagreed and argued more, but I don't think arguing is really, I mean, if we disagree, like we somewhat do on parking in Golden Gate Park, that's fine. But I think it's on a Sunday brunch space. I don't really want to spend the entire time.
I think there should be a gigantic asphalt disc placed above the city where everyone could park.
There you go. Where is Sam Altman? One of my followers on X, by the way.
It will be suspended by Zeppelins.
Oh, yes, please. The other thing I always say to people is, especially these guys, and girls, ladies, whatever, Robin, Pam, and Lucas, Lux Luthor, and all these, bike. Forward guys, Luke Bornheimer, wait till you have aged parents and see how fun that is for you. Or when your kids get old enough that you have to be 4 different places, as Marie, I'm sure, went through, and you have, and I know that Erica probably did, but especially when you have multiple kids. Like, I remember when Mark Farrell was supervisor for District 2, and we were talking about, the bike coalition and how they wanted all these streets closed even then. And he said, I have, 3 kids, all have different activities, and there is no way that I can do my job and my wife can do her job, and then we can go and get them to all these activities across the on a bike. I mean, it's just, these people have very young kids, and that's why it's easy. Young kids and not aged parents. So, let's see how that changes for them, or no kids. So let's see how that changes for them.
Yeah, I mean, the main pusher here are young adults, and some of them not even so young. I mean,
yeah, they're not young. They're in their 40s.
But
time to grow up.
Yeah, I think part of the issue here is, I've spent most of my life without a vehicle. When I lived in San Diego County, I had a vehicle, but it is kind of a pain in the ass. And to me, I've always thought, why do you want to spend 5 figures on something you have to leave outside?
True.
But the reality is that once you have certain other accessories in your life, that we kind of sort of expect, because again, they can be sources of new tax revenue. The car for many people, the car goes with that. And
yeah.
That is something that I think a lot of the people who are using very extreme language, essentially comparing car owners to people who own assault weapons or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I was so attracted to San Francisco from being very young, which is I don't drive. I rode a motorcycle. I learned how to ride a motorcycle here in San Francisco on these crazy hills, and I rode for many, many, many years. But I never really drove a car, and you don't need to. But to have the freedom to, if you want to, is very, very important. So I think they're losing favorability and popularity. So I think that's on the downslope. I think more people, I mean, just look at what's going on in the Sunset District. Joel Engardio is almost certainly going to be tossed off. So, people get fed up after a while. This is not what they want. They do want the freedom to have a car, ride it, drive it, take people.
Well, and for me, it wasn't just a freedom. I needed that for my father, and I needed the Great Highway. That's how we got to the Veterans Hospital.
I mean, that's one of the major frictions that we have here is that we're trying, one of the major complaints about San Francisco is it's not a family-friendly city. How do we make it family-friendly? Well, guess what?
Okay.
What's the first thing you get when you have a family?
A minivan.
Right.
Okay, this is where if somebody wants an argument, okay, great. One of the things that struck me about Daniel Lurie when he was running and afterwards, since then, is there's a focus on bringing more families into the city and trying to get them to stay. When London Breed was mayor, you could have counted on one hand the amount of times she actually said the words family and children, not her focus, right? So we have a pretty big shift in how we do approach who is here and who we want to have here, which we definitely do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I've got Robert on the line. I just let him on. So,
Hi, Robert.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Polar Bear.
Hey.
Hey, not to change the rhythm, but I did want to bring this up in prior spaces, and this one in particular is the idea of incentives. We rail against the budget. It's ridiculous. It's too big. It's out of control. We all know that. The only reason, from my point of view, I've been watching the budget carefully for many, many years. One of the only reasons where it's getting so much more focused attention now is because we have a law that requires us to balance the budget. So we're forced to actually deal with it. But to me, the really deep problem in San Francisco and most of government generally is that we don't have any incentives to do anything in government better, faster, cheaper, or smaller. And so we can complain about all these issues, including all kinds of bad policy design and so on, but particularly with the budget. I think we should spend a considerable amount of time as a city thinking about how to impose or create incentives to drive politicians and the bureaucracy to find ways to deliver services more efficiently. All the incentives are for government growth. They're for creation and preservation of problems, not reduction or elimination of them. And so we don't have the incentives. So I just wanted to toss that out there as a discussion point. And I think it's something that should almost be raised on almost every topic that's discussed on Spaces.
Agree. And again, I just, will bring up a better run city, San Jose, where, Matt Mahan wants to have politicians pay tied to what they accomplish for their constituents. Of course, people are going crazy about it, but, that is your job. And if you can't accomplish anything, why should you get paid a lot of money to do nothing?
And get a raise every year when you've done nothing.
Right.
Yeah, Board of Supervisors used to be a part-time position.
Yeah.
One of the
now it's full-time, and they have 4 staff and, budget, expense budgets and all these other things. It is
pensions.
crushing. Yeah.
Robert, did you want to say something?
Well, one of the most fundamental things that you have to have as a precursor, Catherine Stefani made some progress on, but we really haven't gone very far, is the idea of measurable objectives. And this was in the context of community grant program and nonprofits. And you really need to be able to have objectives that are explicit. You need to measure them, and you need to actually decide whether or not you succeeded or failed, and then either course correct or double down. And so any kind of incentives to improve the efficiency of government services has to start with some kind of a culture of measuring results, of having expectations for better results, measuring them, and actually holding people accountable for how they did relative to the results. But there's a lot of incentives that can be brought into government to improve behavior.
I agree. Yeah. And you say the word accountable, which everybody says the word accountable, but what does it mean? I mean, I've heard it, we've all heard it 1,000 times now. Hold me accountable, says Matt Haney. This needs to be, what does this mean? Does this mean people are fired? Does this mean they get a slap on the wrist?
Yes.
Go to jail? What does this mean? What does
the
word accountable mean in the world of government?
It means all of that. I'll give you a specific example. Imagine if in every single money-based policy that's passed by the Board of Supervisors, that there was a legal requirement that every single policy have both an expiration date and a look-back review requirement, such that in order for any program to be continued after that expiration date, it has to be explicitly discussed by the Board of Supervisors. They have to review how it did relative to objectives. And if it didn't meet those tests, everybody's on record publicly as continuing a crappy program, or you got to shut it down, or you've got to fire employees. The accountability can be really obvious.
Well, yeah. I mean, and that's with the nonprofits. I mean, I always say, if Jennifer Friedenbach, the, executive director of the Coalition on Homelessness, if Tim Cook ran Apple the way she runs homelessness, he wouldn't have a job. So, there has to be accountability. And in her case, like I've continually said, people say, well, she doesn't get city money, but she is the one who not only did she lobby full time for Prop C along with her buddy, Kristen Evans, both of them trust fund babies, by the way. She is in control of the money. And so they've spent $1 billion and come up with about, under 2,000 net units since they got the money. I think it was 700 last year, around 800 in 2024, because they're fiscal years. So, that's not success. And yet they're screaming, give more money to permanent supportive housing. Well, what's your big stash of cash for? That's what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, it just proves that, she's not going to build permanent supportive housing. That's an oxymoron. The term should be temporary supportive housing. You move them in, get them stabilized. If they're functioning, you help them get a job training, get into their own housing. If they're not, then they go into a facility where they can be taken care of. If they can't take care of themselves, if they're a danger to themselves and others, and if they have a long criminal record and you can pin them on something, then they go to prison. I mean, warrants, send them back to jail. I mean, every time you see in Silicon Valley someone pulled over or in an encampment, the first thing they do is check their warrants, and it's like a gold mine. So, Coalition on Homelessness has a completely wrong attitude about what's going to solve what really is a drug issue, not a homeless issue. And yet they go on with people listening to them. I'm super, super happy that Lurie is not listening. He does not have a seat at the table for them when he was discussing moving money from Prop C to his administration, which, will be going to more funding for housing for, sober housing. He refused to give her a seat at the table. And I think that is so great, because that's the first mayor in decades that hasn't listened to her. She's been there 3 decades and gotten a seat. I mean, Lyndon Breed didn't particularly care for her, but she still was getting her way and getting in on the meetings. Right now, she and Kristen Evans are out. They're on the outside for the first time in a very long time. So that makes me hopeful.
I think it is also a recognition of the fact that San Franciscans did really start to notice what was happening and became engaged around the Boise case and, the way that Breed was treating and David Chu were treating the Boise case that we were not allowed to do anything with encampments. We were not allowed to do anything with someone who was homeless. It was almost treated like a get out of jail free card. You couldn't do anything if you couldn't touch them, which was not at all the intent of the Boise case, but it was used that way. And I think that, you know, people's reaction to that was kind of the beginning of the end for Coalition on Homelessness. I do see them as waning and potentially going away in the next couple of years.
And let's be clear, the media has, other than the Marina Times, I mean, I've been writing this about her for decades, but other than me in the Marina Times and now us in The Voice, the other newspapers have held Jennifer Friedenbach up as the voice of homelessness, right? I would say she's the marketing director of homelessness in San Francisco.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
And they still kind of do. Probably one of the worst offenders was Heather Knight. I mean, she did glowing profiles of, if you look her up, you know, Heather Knight, Jennifer Friedenbach, you'll see glowing articles about her and all she does. And this, was a way to perpetrate, you know, to perpetuate her image as the voice of homelessness and solving homelessness, when your daily newspaper, along with your, you know, lefty rags like the Mission Local and 48 Hills, are, you know, screaming and yelling what a great thing she is doing. It makes it very hard for the voice like mine to in the beginning I was called everything, you know, racist, homeless, hater, whatever. What I was proposing was simply common sense. I mean, having worked at Apple during college, I saw what an actual company, a growing company, ran like. And so having had that experience at one of, if not the greatest company in the world, it just makes it so simple for me to say, lack of results means lack of any attention. You get no more attention and no more seat at my table, period.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I watched people walk out of Steve Jobs' office in tears and they got fired because guess what? Performance review. You didn't hit it. Bye. I mean, that's how private companies run. I mean, and, you know, we need to start looking at our nonprofits because they have as much money and their CEOs make big bucks. You know, we need to look at Vitka Eisen, who makes $360,000 a year, or whatever, along with 12 other people, over $2 million in salaries at Health Right 360. We need to start looking at her performance review, and it's bad. Deaths, lawsuits.
Yeah.
Get rid of her.
Yeah. Same with Episcopal Community Services. You know, we spoke up at the board meeting where they were discussing, you know, rubber stamping this contract. You know, I can't remember what the size of the contract was this cycle. I think it was like 73 million or something like that. And, you know, we said, wait a second. and I was actually provided some great information by Mothers Against Drug Deaths where, you know, they've had 40 people die in the last 12 months
Yes.
in the shelters that they, or in the housing facilities that they are responsible for. Why are we giving them more money?
Exactly.
It's
the whole thing with
outrageous.
the Granada Hotel is a case study as to why Episcopal Community Services should not be giving any more money anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Remind us, Mike.
Well, basically, this was an older SRO hotel that had been taken over by them, and they had a lot of legacy SRO residents, and then they started bringing in their supportive housing people, and you know, all of the things that were going to be expected. You know, you would figure, okay, we'll accept the fact that we're going to have supportive housing neighbors in exchange for, you know, having reliable care for the facilities in the hotel. All of those things stopped happening. And of course, so you ended up with broken elevators, you know, dirty hallways, combined with all the other problems that you have living in a supportive housing facility, which is that some people who need some support act out sometimes.
And, we do have to mention the fact that Daniel Lurie's, the building that he sold as his crowning achievement from Tipping Point, is run by Episcopal. So there's in it, that's still one of my main issues with Daniel Lurie is his connection to harm reduction through his nonprofit Tipping Point. And that building has had, just recently had a whole bunch of problems, but deaths, I get all kinds of calls about dog fighting, dog breeding, animal cruelty. The ACC is out there all the time. You've got, drug deaths. You've got, gangs, drug dealers. I mean, and it is run by Episcopal. So there is that. It's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Standard actually has a whole series of articles about starting in late 2021 about the Granada Hotel and the lawsuit. And this also sort of goes back to housing policy generally, because before Granada was bought by ECS, it was one of the legacy sort of disappearing, going away market rate SRO hotels, which is once was seen as an available and appropriate solution for people who are coming into the city and just beginning their career.
Yep.
It was not meant to be someplace where you lock away people who you think are not going to.
Yeah, I had a friend who lived in, I'm not sure it was that one, but in one of the market rate SROs when he was going to San Francisco State.
Yeah.
And, the general one was still sketchy, but he also worked as the desk clerk in one of the hotels there and has told me some really fascinating stories about the people who came through there and gave him money to keep quiet when they took someone upstairs, so to speak. Oh boy. Yeah. Prominent people. So yeah, I think, definitely, I've had numerous friends actually who lived in market rate SROs just because it was what they could afford. And yeah, you don't see much of that anymore.
Yeah. When I first moved back to San Francisco, I moved into the Mosser Victorian Hotel, which is now a completely tourist hotel. It's right across the street from the Marriott.
Wow.
Yeah. So on 4th Street there. So
interesting.
That was probably the nicest SRO hotel in the city.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I mean I think that the budget. I think we just got a note from Griffin with Connected SF, who looked up the budget, and it is $141 million for 3 years for Health Rate 360, and about $82 million over the next 2 years for Episcopal.
Oh my God.
Oh, and then Steve Adami mentioned that 833 Bryan is run by Mercy Housing. But in the beginning, I have a video of Daniel Lurie in 2020 where he talks about how the city is going to bring on Episcopal to run it. So I do believe there is an affiliation with Episcopal. I wrote a story about it, so I'll have to go back to my story. But in that 2020 video, he talks glowingly about his work with Tipping Point and the city bringing on Episcopal Community Services to run 855 Bryan, which there's two different levels. There's Mercy House runs it, but Episcopal does have a part in it, and I'm just forgetting now because of my cheek hurts. But there is I'll find my article and post it. But there is a connection. Here it is.
Any further thoughts on the budget? So far, I guess one thing that we should probably be on the lookout for is this Tuesday at the board. Mayor Lurie is going to be doing his usual, the city mandated appearance before the board.
Yes.
There's no questions set for him from any of the supervisors. So he is probably going to do what he can to sell this current budget. And one of the items that's on the agenda is, which has to do with the last minute negotiations, which is the item to reallocate some of these Prop C funds, which, they're going to need they're going to need a supermajority in order to get that passed for the total number. And again, those numbers and then as a result of that negotiation just sort of led me to believe that, you know, not much was done with it because, you know, the mayor wanted 90 million of those Prop C funds in order to put them into shelters, you know, in order to get people off the street right away, and ended up, you know, getting 19,
which in San Francisco, you know, is gone in 3 days.
You know, pocket exactly.
Change.
Yeah.
19 million paid for.
Oh, and by the way, I did want to just, I went back to my article, and as of 2025, Episcopal Community Services still does provide client services at 855 Bryant. And, you know, while Lurie says that he often holds, you know, that he holds Tipping Point grantees accountable, he hasn't done so with Episcopal Community Services, which has received multiple grants from Tipping Point. So they are still running client services there.
So I think if I understood the reporting on this correctly, and I wasn't there because I was out of town, but I believe that the Prop C money, he was asking for 90 million. I think they allowed for 34 million to be used
if it's a supermajority
for temporary shelter beds. But then there was another 19 million that the supermajority was to, so that I thought that was for going forward, that they could reallocate some funds. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, whatever it was, however this worked out, it was not the amount that the mayor was looking
for. Exactly. It was considerably. The one thing that I think I may have read it wrong as well, but I think one thing that definitely came out of it is that, first off, he didn't get all he wanted. He didn't get anything close to what he wanted. And in order to get all of what they were willing to offer, he's going to have to ask for a supermajority from the board, which is going to be rather difficult to do, given that, you know, the mayor-friendly majority is not a supermajority. You know, you've still got, you know, people like Shaban Walton. You've still got
Fielder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, Fielder, etc. So
again, I just, you know, wanted to bring it really quickly back to the I just got a message from Gina from Mothers Against Drug User. I'm telling you, I'm just out of it. Drug addiction and death. So Episcopal Community Services is the service provider. Mercy is the property manager at 833 Bryant. Episcopal Community Services has had 141 overdose deaths since 2020 in their buildings. They're second only to the infamous Tenderloin Housing Clinic.
Yep.
Outrageous.
141 deaths.
Outrageous that they are still being funded and in business.
And there you go with, again, the budget. Like, what are you kidding me?
Right.
Where is their review? Are they achieving their goals? I would say not. So get rid of them.
Again, that's another personal power issue. I mean, Randy Shaw, in addition to having his way with his contracts and the way he runs his buildings, you know, he also has a police commissioner now, which
yeah, well, you know, it's still, I mean, again, it's sort of like saying we have a moderate board.
Right.
You know, I just don't see it. And again, you know, remember Griffin just also pointed out another thing is that Lurie appointed Doug Shoemaker, president of Mercy, to the Housing Authority Board. And Mercy has a long history with Tipping Point. If you look at their money, if you look at their donations, he has donated in the past. Tipping Point has donated to Mercy. So, I mean, there's a problem for me there in the conflicts. Number one is, where was his judgment at Tipping Point? Because he said he held them accountable, yet he continued donating to these groups that were, you know, people were dying of overdoses. So I do have issues with the conflicts there. They can't be ignored. So they're also
I'm gonna
opening on
jump in
7th.
here, about a story just going on to the moderate board, not moderate board. I think one of the funniest things that has come up just recently has been the fact that the more radical element of the progressive wing in San Francisco are miffed that we don't have as much of a they don't have as much of an influence on San Francisco as they thought that they had. So I thought that was a really interesting one. So we may not have a moderate board, but we're not as radical as some wish us to be.
Well,
they're all talking about New York now, and I wonder if they're right there as well, simply because, I mean, that was a result that you got because he talked about kitchen table issues, and because the only other alternative was Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah.
Which nobody supported. And I think what's going to end up happening is that Mayor Eric is going to continue to be Mayor Eric.
I believe so as well.
But,
from your lips to God's ear.
Yeah, isn't it sad? We're rooting for a guy who's mired in corruption and got a pardon from the president and, as being a better choice. But I still think he is a better. I mean, it's a sad choice, but a better choice. I also think that the guy, the socialist, guy that again, modem, whatever. Yeah, I'm sorry, my brain. He's kind of. Now people are doing a lot of digging into him. He's having some, saying and doing some dumb things. He's feeling cocky and arrogant, and people are finding all kinds of stuff. If they vote him in knowing what they know, then God help New York. I won't be visiting anytime soon.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but I do believe that San Francisco needs to think, I, again, do not understand how people voted in Jackie Fielder. Great example. What in the world are the white elites in Bernal Heights thinking? It doesn't affect them, right? They're nowhere near Julian Avenue. They don't care.
Right.
She hasn't been to.
Their luxury beliefs are self-actualized.
Yeah, isn't it crazy? There's just a lot of work to be done. I did have a funny DM from some anonymous person that goes by Debbie with an Oakland zip code, which is Brandon Rami, and one of his many aliases, and said something about me being funded by right wing, extreme something or others, and I'm laughing. I'm thinking right wing with DSA person, anything to the to the right of DSA is a right wing extremist to them. So that kind of thought is pattern just is beyond me at this point with what's happened to the city and Oakland.
Speaking of which, one other little tidbit, not entirely connected to the budget, but one tidbit that I may be looking at tomorrow during Rules Committee is Connie Chan, our favorite supervisor, has introduced a while back sort of this stealth bill that would essentially restrict the ability of 501c3s and 501c4s to move money around. And it's kind of interesting. Basically, what it does is that it would prevent any C3s that contract or subcontract with the city from providing funds or from providing the money they got from the city to any C4s. And you've got to wonder, I mean, we all know who this is aimed at, but how effective is it going to be other than being like a mosquito bite? And how do you enforce it?
How do you enforce it?
Yeah.
Anyone?
Yeah, I'm gonna pass on this. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So. Anyway.
Well, it's kind of like
You charge and arrest the violators. If it becomes law that a C3 cannot off loan or off grant monies to C4s, which are political organizations and endorsement organizations, And if it can be found that they did so, it's breaking the law.
Right, but you have to find out how when and how they did it, though, which just seems.
Which goes back to auditing nonprofit groups, and why we don't do efficacy audits and compliance audits. We need much more oversight of our nonprofit groups.
Well, the problem here is I suspect that the sponsor here is expecting selective enforcement.
Well, exactly. It also, tickles me to no end when this Burning Bird project or the Burnt Bird, Julie Pitta and pals go after the dark money, but they're a 501(c) dark money organization. As far as Coalition on Homelessness, they're a 501(c)(3), and they've actually been breaking the law for years, because as a 501(c)(3), and we know because we have a very good lawyer, you are allowed to do a little bit of lobbying. Particularly, they encourage it to be in off election years, but you are allowed to lobby for things a little bit. I think it's less than 5% of your time. They lobby full time. I mean, Proposition C was her full-time job. She spent all of her time lobbying for Prop C. So if someone really wanted to go after Jennifer Friedenbach, they could turn her into the IRS, because she lobbies full time, and that would definitely cause her to lose her 501(c)(3) status. But I don't think that's who Connie's after.
Anyway, I'm sure we'll see what happens, but might be interesting to hear some of the comment on it tomorrow in committee, but we'll see what happens. So it's 12:46 actually. Do we want to wrap things up? Anybody have any final thoughts?
Just want to remind everybody to visit thevoicesf.org, sign up for our newsletter. It's down at the bottom of every article. There's a donate button on the right. We are a 501(c)(3), fully tax-exempt, complying California nonprofit. And follow us on X, which is at the VOSF. And Marie, how can they find you? Did we lose Marie?
Marie? Did we lose her? Let me see if she sent me a text. I'm not seeing anything.
Well, I think it is connectedsf.org. They do a lot of great work with petitions and getting people involved and active in their districts. Gotta support the people that go out and do the work. And, she says she can't speak. Open her mic.
Oh, okay. Let me see. What's going on here? I'll prove her. There we go. Also, speaking of Connected SF, we've got Griffin is.
Hey there. I am here.
Hey, there she is. She's back.
Somehow my microphone got turned off and I could not get it back on. Oh. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's connectedsf.org. We also have a 501(c)(3) called Inspire SF. Connectedsf is .com. But people can also reach out to me here on X. We are just doing our part to help make San Francisco a better place, and just every day.
And Griffin is going to be submitting to us a piece on the new controversy in the city. Is where are we going to put all those new shelters that aren't going to be in the Tenderloin or Bayview?
Yes.
So
exactly.
So
yeah, that's a whole nother ball game.
Indeed.
Okay.
Well, listen, thanks very much for listening. Again, it's thevoicesf.org. Subscribe, read our webpage, subscribe if you can,
and
recommend, share.
It's free, but we'd love a donation to keep supporting independent journalism, and that is, probably the only outlet out there that's doing what we do. And we are award winning, in our first year.
Sure.
And so please do visit and subscribe. And Mike is a great longtime San Francisco City Hall gets the dirt. And so the newsletter, which you'll get directly to your inbox by subscribing, always has a fun intro. And I learned so much from that newsletter. So definitely check it out.
I may have to do an update on the ladder factory.
Yes, I think so. I was just going to say that. It sounds like a perfect newsletter item.
Okay, well, listen, thanks everybody for listening and participating, and have a great Sunday.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.